Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Co-op. This is a beautiful Thursday morning in Washington, D.C., and I am at the Impact Conference, the Cooperative Impact Conference, and I have four emerging leaders that we're going to talk to today. Good morning.
Good morning, Vernon.
Good morning.
So let's start off. I will ask you, Anthony, first. Where did you grow up and go to school? What's your background?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, still reside there. I went to the University of Toledo, received my undergrad degree, Bachelor of Science degree, went back and got my master's in business administration, and then actually just completed my PhD earlier this year in May in public health.
Oh, fantastic. PhD. Boy, when I grew up. All right, Anthony, how did you learn about co-ops?
So actually, I was working for a healthcare system. I was starting to do food systems work, worked in a social determinants of health department, and opened and was operating nonprofit grocery stores and doing food security work, and was doing that on a regional basis and just was interested in scaling and doing that work on a national basis. And so I just started Googling national food system organizations and came across National Co-op Brochures, NCG, which is where I'm employed. Started following them, following their work, happened to see a job opening that they posted, and 3 years later, here I am. So I had no background in co-ops, was doing food security work, mainly in the nonprofit space, but had no knowledge of co-ops until I started with NCG.
So you're telling me you got an undergrad degree, master's and PhD, and you learned nothing about co-ops?
Nothing. No. Yeah, I was doing the math. I figured you'd ask that. I'm a fan of the show. 12 years before college and 12 years approximately in college, and never heard about co-ops.
24 years of education. Boy, we got changed that. My story is very similar to yours, but now, how did you get the first job in NCG?
On LinkedIn, and saw the opportunity for business innovation director, and it was similar to what I was doing, and I was looking for, again, opportunity to do it on a larger national scale.
All right, so now let's go to Laura.
All right, well, I'm Laura. I was born in Mexico and migrated to the United States when I was 4. Grew up in Southern California, went to undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, where I studied global and international studies, and did a lot of community and immigrant organizing there. After a lot of years working with nonprofits, went to school at Mills College and did an MBA, kind of focused on social justice, and now I'm here. I live in Oakland, California, and work with Project Equity.
Okay, same.
Yeah.
Better education. You got a master's degree. Did you do anything in your formal education about co-op?
Not formally. I was introduced, in education. No. Informally, yes, have some experience with cooperatives, but in formal education, I had zero education in cooperatives.
So how did you get to informal?
Yeah, I think as an immigrant, I think cooperatives are kind of
I'm sorry, you said you're an immigrant?
Yes, as an immigrant in my immigrant family growing up in a low-income cooperative work. So I went to undergrad as an undocumented student, and so I had to find ways to pay for school alternatively. So I was part of informal lending circles so that I can afford to pay for college. Or there was always collective childcare within our immigrant families or collective housing. And so those were sort of my introduction to cooperatives, just formal kind of organizing, sort of as to close a gap within my family or, my community. And then I got informally introduced to cooperatives when I was in undergrad and heard about housing cooperatives. And one of our local grocery store was a cooperative as well, and I was a patron there. Although I was not a member because I did not understand what a cooperative was.
Okay. All right. What country did you immigrate from?
Yeah, Mexico.
Mexico. Okay. All right. Now let's go over to Salvador. Are you from Mexico too?
Yes, I am. I was born in the state of Chihuahua, and similar to Laura, I was brought to the U.S. when I was 3, and I lived in the Southwest my whole life, and I grew up in Denver, in Colorado. I grew up in West Denver, and from an early age, I was involved in organizing and activism, became involved in the Chicano movement, and I remained in the city where I obtained my education at CU Denver. I studied political science as an undergrad, and then there was a graduate program that was started that had some emphasis on cooperative development and the social economy, started by Dr. G, Minson G, and I went back. So I started a dual graduate degree program where I've completed a master's in political science, and I'm completing an MBA currently.
Okay. Same question. Did you learn anything in your formal education, 2 master's degrees, undergrad degree, and so you went through all the way through high school in the U.S. because you came here when you were 3 years old. So did you learn anything in all that formal education about co-ops?
Graduate school, there were professors that had recommended I look into cooperatives as a way to practice my community organizing and devotion service to community. Although at the time, my organization that I'm with right now did not exist then, and in Denver, it was really hard to come across cooperative development. So it wasn't until I went to graduate school and the organization that I'm with now, the Center for Community Wealth Building, was established that serves the Denver community, that offers the types of programs that I took 6 years ago that I now help to lead.
Fantastic. So now we go to Autumn. Tell us about your background.
Yes, I am from a small town in Catawba County, North Carolina, and I went to Meredith College in Raleigh and got my Bachelor's of Arts in History, and then moved to Charlotte and got my MBA with Pfeiffer University. Yeah, and now I work for Carolina Telco Federal Credit Union in Charlotte.
Did you learn about co-ops in your formal education?
In my formal education, not any at all. 7 years of college and 12 years of secondary or post school. Nothing.
So where did you learn about co-ops?
So with my history degree in hand, very proudly.
Wait a minute. History.
Very proudly got a job supervising a Starbucks out of college, and I realized I did not like that. So I quit that, started 2 other jobs, and started looking for a different full-time job. Started looking for my career, my passion, what I wanted to do with my life. And one day, out of the blue, I got a call from a local credit union asking me to come in to interview. I had put in so many applications, I had forgot that I had applied at this credit union. I spent 4.5 years with that credit union, and I knew we were cooperative, but I had no idea to what expanse it was. I am very blessed that once I started there 2.5 years ago with Carolina's Telco, I was able to become more in the credit union movement, and I actually, we have a conference called Principles in Philosophy in North Carolina that the Credit Union Foundation puts on, we go through the entire cooperative movement. And we, learn about the cooperative principles and things like that. So I've been in a cooperative for about 8 years now, but part of the cooperative movement and really seeing it and wanting it to flourish and grow, I think about 3 years.
Okay. So let's talk about the benefits of co-op. Who would like to tell me what you have learned after you learned about co-ops, not in your formal education, except for Salvador got a bit in his graduate school. What do you find are the benefits of co-op? You want to start with Anthony again and go on?
Yeah, sure. So I guess particularly within my work in food system work, I really see co-ops as an opportunity to fill the gap and to provide access to healthy, affordable food in communities that have been economically oppressed and intentionally underdeveloped. And so this latest wave of food co-op development that we're seeing is really communities of color, low-income communities, rural communities that lack equitable access to food. And so not only do they provide kind of that practical access to food, but they do so in a way that provides opportunity to build wealth within communities and do so in a non-extractive way, which, as I think about 10 years ago, as I started to work in food system work, the real energy was really around if we could attract a big box grocer, if we could just get a chain grocer to come into our community, that would solve all our problems. And what we saw was those grocers moved in, and if profits weren't high enough, that someone outside the community made the decision to close that store. And so co-ops, I think, provide an opportunity not only to fill that access, but to do so in a way that's democratically controlled by that community, and those profits and wealth that's generated remain inside of the community. So that's one of the biggest benefits that I see. And I think they also provide hope, drawn from Brother Amaha Selassie, it's bigger than just the food co-op. And so I think it provides a practical way for co-ops to organize and really leverage their resources and their own talents within their community to open this food co-op, and then that really be a gateway for them to recognize the power and do bigger things to really adjust the needs within their communities themselves.
Fantastic. I like the hope part. Anthony, I don't remember, what city did you grow up in?
Toledo.
Okay. Toledo has some blighted areas and food desert.
It does, yeah. That was my introduction into this food system and food security work. I worked for a large anchor healthcare system. This was back in 2015. That was really looking at the start of the social determinants of health before it became so commonly known, recognizing that there's only so much that medical care that happens within communities or within the hospital, that it's really about everyday conditions and access to food and good education and good jobs. And so they opened a nonprofit grocery store in a former food desert area. And so, yeah, that was my entry into this world.
Interesting that you go from the determinants of health to co-ops. And I'm also very interested in the determinants of health because a lot of time in those low-income, low-resource communities, you may find that the life expectancy may be 10 to 20 years lower than the suburbs or white affluent communities are. All of those determinants of health, whether it's housing or food access or medical care, you end up living shorter lives and less quality life. Okay. Laura.
Right. Well, most of my experience is with worker cooperatives, but regardless of whether it's a worker co-op or otherwise, I do see cooperatives as sort of a vehicle for economic and social justice. And so I have three different examples that kind of exemplify that. And so one, for example, I worked with a group of promotoras, immigrant women who are kind of community outreach workers who none of them had the right to work, meaning they're documented, don't have a work permit, and had been hired as independent contractors with a nonprofit in California. California law changed, and no longer contract certain people as contractors. You had to make them employees. But if you don't have the right to work, then you can't be legally an employee. So the cooperative was a great alternative for these group of folks who didn't have the right to work. Because in an LLC, member-managed worker cooperative, cooperative, no one is an employee. Everyone is a worker owner and everyone is a partner. So we created this vehicle as an alternative for people to have the opportunity to, one, have a job, two, own a business, and have access to building wealth. And not only that, but be part of like this really empowering kind of decision-making process. And so those folks are called the Promotora Co-ops. I forget.
Yes. I'm so excited about the first one.
Yes.
That co-ops can be used for immigrants that cannot work, legally cannot be an employee.
Yes.
Okay, so California helped the co-op world by changing the law that you couldn't be.
Exactly. We're kind of forced to be creative, right? Because, historically, like, if you don't have the right to work, then the loophole was then to be a contractor, because you could have an ITIN number, have your own business, and not be employed, right? But with that, then people were no longer able to be independent contractors, but people were able to form, cooperatives or other types of businesses.
Can you give me? Listen, I'm so excited about this, and I may not want to talk directly to you guys. Okay.
Oh, don't worry.
Give me one example of a co-op that was formed by these immigrants.
For example, I work with Cooperative Co-op. There's an organization to help immigrant women. They have a lot of immigrant-led cooperatives that have used this structure. So if you go to their website, cooperativecoop.org, I believe something, you will find a lot of examples of these kinds of co-ops.
Okay, so they end up backdooring getting into a co-op, having to form one, becoming a member owner, not an employee, and they democratically can vote, one member, one vote, at how the co-op operates.
Exactly, right? And it's both on like the operations and then the governance piece, because there isn't any really like general manager that has to tell them. You could have an administrator, but when you're like member managed, then all of the members also have the right to vote around like the operations piece and not just the.
From Laura, from the Black experience, you don't have a massa. Okay. You get to control your own.
Yes.
Do you find that those immigrant workers made more money being in the co-op? Are there any research on that?
Yeah, I mean, this co-op in particular is still new. I don't have a lot of data, but I do have one woman that is part of that co-op who was able, through this employment, have work security, or not through employment, but through this opportunity to have work security and able to build wealth, to buy a house in the Bay Area. Really, so it's sort of like, yeah. There are cases and a lot of good stories where, these opportunities or these kind of structures create a lot of opportunity for wealth and housing opportunities and job security.
Wow, I love it. And maybe have you back. I'm going to leave those other two examples, and we're going to go over to Salvador. Salvador, would you explain to us what you found the benefits of co-ops are?
Absolutely. So to add to the conversation, it's an economic opportunity for people who are left out of the system, and cooperatives today, as well as historically, have been used by folks who haven't necessarily had access to capital or the knowledge, perhaps, to be able to start their own business or venture on by themselves. It's a way for people to pool resources and be able to work together to diminish the risk rather than just one person taking it all on completely. Create supportive networks for people to be able to learn and navigate the system together. And they're a way to empower folks to be able to reach their full potential, right? So one of the principles of cooperatives is education, training, being able to support people to reach their goals. And we know that cooperatives historically have been a solution or something that people come together and organize in times of crisis, both in today's times after economic downfalls, as well as in the 20th century back to 19th century, it's always been a time for people to be able to come together and create systems that are self-help, self-led, for people that want to be able to create a livelihood for themselves, not be dependent on other folks. In Denver, there's a specific instance where recently the urban area, to your point earlier, Vernon, the urban areas where historically Latinx, Black communities, people were being left out of the economic boom and pushed out of communities. And the cooperative model, cooperative economics, provide a way for people to be able to stay in their communities, to be able to also enjoy some of the wealth created in the area, and be able to afford to live in those communities, right? And instead of being gentrified and pushed out. So those would be some of the ways in which cooperatives help. One of the other principles is concern for communities. So cooperatives really have an intention to create and add to the social fabric, contribute to the communities in which they're placed, rather than extract. And by extraction, I mean extracting from the labor force, from the community there, or extracting from resources or some other way. Cooperatives have a different way of viewing the community place where they're established. So they start transforming people's and communities being able to provide opportunities that weren't there before. So those would be some of the ways in which I've seen cooperatives impact people a lot.
We're going into our first and only break here. I'm going to come back and talk about some more of these success stories and what you all have been doing, and talk a little bit about the future after the break. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. You know, Anthony, Laura, Autumn, and Salvador, we've been on air now we just finished our 11th year, and you all are the first program in the 12th year. So we finished up 11 years doing this program, and all of that time, National Co-op Bank has been our main sponsor, particularly financial sponsor, but they've also been our main cheerleader. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. So everything I've heard you all talk about, no matter if it's in Toledo or Denver, California, wherever you're at, if it's a low-income community, you need financial resources, and this NCB could be a place when you want to talk about funding cooperatives and or cooperative members. Okay? They've been fantastic. So, Autumn, I said when we come back, I wanted to ask you, what do you see are the benefits of cooperatives? Since you've been in it for 8 years, but you only started learning about it 3 years ago. You didn't even know the first 5 years you were at a credit union that you're in a co-op or the benefits of co-op. So tell us what you learned.
So I knew I was part of a cooperative. I just didn't know what that meant in detail. I knew that meant that the members of the credit union were member owners, that they got that same one member, one vote kind of deal. But I think what a lot of people miss is they see the credit union and they go, okay, credit unions are focused on money. So they're here to help me reach my financial goals in credit unions. We're here to make your journey, your financial journey easier. But in reality, credit unions do so much more. So I'm very, very, very blessed to be what's called a credit union development educator. So these credit unions, credit unions, cooperatives, we focus on what we call the 12 developmental issues. And those 12 developmental issues are, things like housing, food, environment, savings, and, credit, inclusion, belonging. And what you really see is every single one of these developmental issues goes back to a type of co-op. These types of co-ops are really filling that void. And I know, as everyone else has said, co-ops are created when the system isn't working as well as it could. So we're here to fill that void. And so credit unions want to work with other cooperatives to ensure that our members have everything they need. So, I can help you with an auto loan. I can help you with a checking account and a savings account. What I can't always help you with is food desert. That's where the grocery cooperatives come in. What I can't help you with normally is maybe a job. That's where our worker co-ops come in. So the benefit of the credit union and the benefit of cooperatives is if we can't do it, we know a cooperative or we know somebody that's doing it, and that's our P6 principal, cooperatives cooperating. And so it really just is one larger group here, especially at Impact, where we're trying to meet the needs of every people out there. We want to help every single person that we can. And usually if you ask somebody, if you can't answer the question, somebody else can. So I think the benefit of the cooperative is it's kind of like a large family. It's not maybe what you know, it's kind of who you know. If I can't do it, I know somebody who can.
Co-op is a family. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we've talked about the different types of co-ops. I'm going to quickly talk about what I've called 4 types of co-ops. And the first 2 depends on who owns and controls the co-op. If the employee owns and controls the business, then it's a worker co-op. And therefore, it could be a worker co-op could be any business you can think of. Laura, I heard that if it's over 500 employees, that it might not work well, but I don't buy that. I think it could be any business.
I agree. I don't buy it either. A lot of people think that, making decisions happen will be a lot difficult, but at the end of the day, it's how you organize it and how the structures that you provide to support people in making those decisions. But I think people want to be engaged, people want to participate, and I think it's very possible to have large companies be cooperatives or worker cooperatives.
Right, I do too. And have you used sociocracy at all?
I personally haven't. No.
I think that's a wonderful way of governance or managing the whole business. The second type of business is if it's owned and controlled by the person that uses the products and services, then it's a consumer co-op. And you have housing co-ops, credit unions, food co-ops. REI is a consumer co-op. So food co-ops can be a worker co-op, or it could be a consumer co-op, or both, which is called a hybrid. The next 2 is if a group of people come together and form a business to buy the products or services that they need. So farmers would form a business to buy what they need to produce whatever they're producing. That's called a purchasing cooperative. Farmers are using it. Artists are using it. There's a group in D.C. called Consumer Purchasing Alliance, and that was set up for churches and schools and other nonprofits. And if a group of people or businesses come together to market their product or services, then it's called a marketing co-op. A marketing co-op, if it adds value to whatever they bring, then sometimes that's called a producer. So I have marketing producer together. And Cabot Creamery, Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray are all marketing co-ops. And there's an artist group of Black women in Pittsburgh called Ujamaa. They are artists. They've come together where they have a storefront and they have an online presence to sell their jewelry and paintings and clothing, and they'll take other art from people in the diaspora around the world to sell in their location. So that is a marketing co-op. So those are the different types as we go around and talk about co-ops. And you talked about most of these. then they fall somewhere in there. Laura, another question. When you were saying that you were collectively getting money to help you go to college, have you ever heard of SUSU?
Yes. In Mexico or Latin American countries, they're called tandas or condinas. So they're community lending circles. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting because I've only known about them in Africa and the Caribbean. I didn't know it.
Yeah, they happen in Latin American countries too.
Fantastic. Okay. Future. What do you see? Well, we talked a little bit about that. The future of co-ops. Anthony, let's start with you again. Particularly since you have a PhD and you do research.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the latest wave that we're seeing within the startup food co-op community are really food co-ops that are addressing food access. And so there's about 100 startups right now that in various stages working with FCI. Shout out to Food Co-op Initiative, doing great work. And about half of those are startups located in that are Black-led, located in rural communities, indigenous communities. And so at NCG, we're really focused on developing resources to help support them and support long-term viability. And so NCG is a co-op of food co-ops. We have about 160 members that operate 230-ish stores across 40 states. Most of our members are natural foods co-ops located in affluent communities. And so over NCG's 25-year history of serving its members, many of the resources and programs that have been developed have been to support natural food stores and have contributed to the success and growth that we've seen within the natural foods co-op industry. And so with this latest wave and different approach, we're really focused on developing resources to help support co-ops located in low-income, low-access communities or more diverse communities. And so, it's one thing to get the store open, but, we kind of joke that that's the easy part. The hard part is really keeping the store open. And so one thing that's top of mind is really the ability to compete on price. And so we've been hard at work to get a contract to support conventional goods. We've always had a contract for natural foods, but many of the stores that are opening in low-income, low-access communities are more of a hybrid mix. So they're selling natural foods, but also conventional foods. And so we're really focused on making sure that those co-ops, if they're interested in joining NCG, are able to compete on price and offer a hybrid or a primarily conventional. Gem City Market in Dayton, Ohio, has been open about 3 years now. They're about a 90% conventional product mix. And until they joined NCG about a year ago, they weren't getting any kind of advantage on the supply side, which makes it really hard from a price perception standpoint. And so that's just one example, but we're really focused on developing resources to support those stores and to get engaged a lot earlier in the process. It takes about 10 years to open a food co-op right now on average, which is ridiculous, especially in communities where this is really about equity and survival and access to food. And so we hope by developing these resources to get them, once they're open, but also thinking about how do we get engaged earlier in the process and hopefully kind of reduce the time that it takes to open, reduce the cost, and hope that we're able to help develop their business plan for long-term viability.
So, Anthony, Gem City, you mentioned Brother Amaha Selassie earlier, and they've been in 3 years. And the things that you're doing to help them to stay live and be profitable, because the margins in the food business are very low, very, very, very low. And so did you ever study the Renaissance and why it failed?
I did, yeah. That was part of. So I lead the development cooperative at NCG, which is the research and development R&D arm. And so I really spent the last few years researching the needs of co-ops, what's went well, what hasn't worked. And so they were really gracious with sharing of information of things that were challenges for them and advice for the next wave. So yeah, I've definitely studied renaissance. And I know a lot of people are also, following Gem City and following Detroit people very closely and just learning from their journey as well.
Yeah, because we had Ed Whitfield on at one point to explain that to us, because I was at the up-and-coming conference that you mentioned FCI helps to produce. And when it was announced, and the gloom in the room was terrible. Yeah. And I had gotten a chance to meet Amaha there, and what's the brother from Detroit?
Malik
Yakini. So it took them 13 years.
Right.
And they raised $22 million to do that. So that was a little bit longer than 10 years. Let's go now to Laura. Thank you, sir. And where do you see future in co-op, and what's needed?
I am a community organizer at heart, so although I work with small businesses to convert them into cooperatives, I feel like, conversions aren't the end goal, right? Like, the end goal for me is social justice, economic justice. And so when we think about the political landscape and what we're in, the attack on immigrants and, global warming and climate and how all these social issues impact communities of color, low-income communities, I think cooperatives are at the solution of all those issues, right? And so I think that it's important for those that are working in the cooperative sector and the different, technical service providers, funders, lenders, attorneys, policymakers really need to listen to what is happening on the ground. How are these, communities are being impacted, and how are they already organizing themselves cooperatively and really enforcing their own solutions? There is a lot of already emerging, cooperatives that come from those communities, and I think it is important that those of us that are kind of on the outside kind of resource what's happening there and help them grow. Whether we like it or not, I think the solutions are going to.
All right. Salvador, what about you? How you see the future and what's needed?
The conference where we're at right now is the future is collaborative, and I see a future where humans working together to be able to provide for what our communities need is essential, right? And being able to set up systems, set up economies that are based on being able to help communities, being able to help each other, right? That are not dependent on extracting in any form from either at home or abroad anymore, right? And there's things about cooperatives that spur innovation, right? That speak to the productivity of shared responsibility, shared ownership. There's a lot of things there in terms of people being dissatisfied in conventional businesses or conventional jobs, right? Not long ago, we heard about the Great Resignation because people were just not happy, and some of the other factors, such as the pandemic, were really contributing to that. And that is a symptom of when people are being listened to at their jobs. Cooperatives have a way of really creating an environment where people feel heard, where people feel like they can contribute to the overall process and goal of the cooperative business, where it's headed. So there's a lot there that there's been great things written about. And cooperatives can really go beyond what some of the other models can provide. So oftentimes you'll hear cooperatives being mentioned as triple bottom line businesses. Well, what does that mean? It means that, yes, they do have to be profitable in order to be sustainable. But they go beyond that. They have added layers of complexity because they serve the members, right? That's the primary goal, is to be able to serve members, but also concern for community and the environment, which other models fall short on. Vernon, you mentioned some of the big marketing producer co-ops and the great projects that they are able to get to market. I see cooperatives as a way to provide better products, better food for ourselves, for our family, right? Supporting farmers that are on a smaller scale. And when we speak about our current moment in time, we know that a lot of small businesses are owned by the baby boomer generation, and they've had small businesses for decades, ran them successfully, and now those owners are looking to retire soon and creating succession plans. And cooperatives can really be a way for them to pass the company, right, convert it over to a cooperative opportunity for their employees, as well as being able to keep providing products and services to the community. And that's a big thing, including in Denver, in Colorado, where there's this effort right now to be able to provide this type of assistance for business owners who are interested in selling to their employees, to be able to retain that brand, that reputation, the great service that they're known for, by being able to keep their team. So those are some of the things, right, that we can touch on, because the transfer of wealth is happening in many forms, and business ownership, we know, is one of those components that adds to the American dream, along with owning a home and so forth. And the reason why cooperatives are such a powerful tool in BIPOC communities is because in BIPOC communities, say the Black and Latinx communities, we know that there's a lower rate of business and home ownership in comparison to other groups. And without those being in place, prosperity is not felt by everybody. And it's a really big, important piece for the middle class. So I'll go ahead and stop there.
So I think Laura will maybe pay you, because it sounds like you just gave a commercial for Project Equity. Its role is this job, its mission, is that conversion that you talk about of the silver tsunami of folks my age that are retiring. They go in and help convert them into co-ops. Is that right?
That is correct. That was going to be one of my points, but it seems like Salvador.
Okay, very well. And the triple bottom line, Salvador, I just said easy. It's people in co-ops. It's people, planet, profit. In that order. Okay, profit is important, but it's not the most important thing. We're in capitalistic. We're three of us. I have an MBA, and I think three others have MBAs. That, at least in my MBA, and it was at Stanford, all decisions was made on what was the greatest return of profit for the shareholder, who may not even live in the community. Okay, so I have the three most important things in the capitalistic model is profit, profit, and profit. Still three P's, but all profit, which also leads to sometimes very poor decision-making, short-term decision-making that could be harmful for the planet or for people. Adam, we're to you now to talk about the future. Where do you see the future of co-op in the credit union space?
I'm going to keep it short and sweet on that part. 2025 has been named the International Year of the Cooperative, and the future is cooperative. I know that sounds cliche, and that's our theme here this week, but it really is. Credit unions are here to help our members. We're here to help them grow in whatever way we can. As a certified financial credit union counselor, I can have these conversations with people about how to build their future. Do they want to start a business? Do they want to buy a home? These are conversations we're having in credit unions every day, because for me, it's not about the bottom line. And again, it's people over profit, people helping people. And at the end of the day, that's what we really do. And I think what has been beautifully said here through all of our perspectives is that the cooperatives are filling the gaps. You know, we continue to talk, there's financial crisis. We're talking about housing crisis, food deserts, jobs, immigration. We have heard the solution from the people sitting here at this table. And so if you have emerging leaders knowing the solution, you have every generation knowing the solution. And so it's just a beautiful way to come together. And, I mean, for something that wasn't scripted, it sounds like it was put together perfectly.
Yes, it happens that way a lot.
Cooperative way. You know, cooperatives are the future, and I think that's just the easiest way to put it.
Okay, so with that in mind, cooperatives are the future. That's the theme of this conference, the Cooperative Impact Conference, where we are. Somebody start, whoever wants to start, whatever message you would like to leave people with. Who would like to start? What message would you like to leave people?
I think I'll go first since I have been last the rest of the time. I'm saving the best for last.
All right.
But I think the real message is find your local cooperative. If you're looking to get involved, find your local cooperative. Find your local cooperative association. So in North Carolina, we have the Cooperative Council of North Carolina. If you've got cooperative questions, we hopefully have answers. And if we don't, we know the right people that do. So if you don't know where to get involved, start somewhere, and I promise you we will get you to the right place. But just ask. You don't know until you ask.
Next. Thank you.
Well, first off, I will be remiss if I didn't say congratulations to Baba Oaks for your induction into the Hall of Fame later this evening. I meant to say that at the top of the show. I'm a firm believer in, you can't be what you can't see. And so thank you for your not only your contribution to the field, but also the inspiration as a young Black man and as an emerging leader within the cooperative space. Thank you. I'm talking about you. You're an inspiration for what I want to be when I grow up. But my message would just be simple. If you're working on starting a food co-op, if you're working on one, please reach out. Let's talk. If you're a co-op organization that's working on startup food co-ops, I would love to talk and see how we can collaborate. They can email me, anthony.goodwin@ncg.coop.
Okay, Anthony Goodwin.
Anthony.goodwin@ncg.coop.
Thank you. Okay, what's the message? What do you want to leave people with?
Well, I also have to follow up on Anthony's message and say congratulations, Vernon, on being inducted to the Cooperative Hall of Fame, and thank you for your many years of service and contributions to the movement. And I would add and say to find practice to be able to start meeting like-minded folks and start having conversations about solutions. And I would say I would make the suggestion not to look at us having to solve all of the world's problems, being able to understand perspectives that we make a big impact. Every day, the work that we do, the contributions that we do can generate change, inspire people, be a liberating force for other aspects in our community. So those are the ways. So reach out to people involved in the movement.
Thank you. Laura, you had the last word?
I think for me, it's like wherever you are, whoever you are, ask yourself, how can I be more cooperative? You can be cooperative in so many different ways and so many different stages. And then two, if you are interested in business conversions, being privately owned to being cooperatively owned, also hit me up or hit up projectequity.org.
Okay. Everybody out there, we're glad that you listened to us today. We thank you emerging leaders. We'll be back next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.